Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Take Back My Brain. I am your host, Lori Hammer, and we're kind of veering off the health topic today, which I'm really actually excited about. I have with me today Stacy Besch, and I'm so excited to have her because I've known Stacy since, gosh, we were in junior high, maybe earlier, I think. I mean, we did confirmation class together, Lutheran Youth Fellowship, all of that stuff, went on crazy trips. So I've known Stacy a long time. She's been an entrepreneur. She has a passion for our community like no one you've ever met. And so it's been really fun to watch her over the years. And now she is part of Team Iowa that works with human trafficking. And so this is such an important topic that I couldn't wait to interview Stacy once I found out that she was doing this. And so we're going to talk about probably some really tough stuff today, but we need to make more awareness of this, especially in light of what's going on in our country, which is making this issue a whole lot worse. So I want you to welcome and thank you, Stacy, for being here today.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we go back way far, and I just,
Way far.
Lori, I think it's just awesome that, life, is not as big as what we think it is when it comes to just the connections we make and God connects the dots. And I'm really appreciative that you asked me to be on here because we understand that awareness to anything is key in trying to combat anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So how long have you been working with Team Iowa?
Well, Team Iowa, I back up a little bit here. I started a Christian Patriot group up here in Northern Iowa.
Right.
And I started that in May of 21. So we have been doing that for about almost 3.5 years. Because of answering that call to start to do a Christian Patriot group, I had the Steve Corey, who is our state director from Sioux City, came up to speak. I didn't know much about Team Iowa at the time. I just knew that was a group that was meeting, that was underneath Team America, that was just trying to bring awareness to all types of issues and priority initiatives that our states and our country is facing.
Right.
Well, after Steve came and he was our guest speaker at our Patriot meeting, before he left, he said, "Stacy, you're joining Team Iowa." So yeah,
Okay.
that's how literally I got on Team Iowa. He could see that I have a love for our country and our community, like you said. So I appreciate that comment. But I do. I love our country. That's what a patriot is. Someone who will do anything to defend our country and protect what God has ordained. So that's kind of how I got involved with, I guess, the Patriot Group, which then got me to Team Iowa. Now, Team Iowa, then I've been a part of that for over 2 years, probably about 2.5 years. And it was at a team, we meet on Zoom every Sunday night for 2 hours
Okay.
on Team Iowa because we are patriots all over the state.
Right.
And one time on one of our calls over 2 years ago, we started identifying the priority initiatives that we felt that we could help with in our state. And of course, human trafficking came up as number one. And I'll give you the first reason why, because Iowa is number 3 in the country based on per capita.
I know. I don't think people understand that.
No. And
Yeah.
you know what? I'll be honest, I didn't even understand it. I mean, I started, learning very quickly and rapidly, but Lori, you and I came from the Johnny Gosh days.
Yeah.
So when we come from that, we thought we automatically think it's about kidnapping and it's about,
Yep.
just all of it's driving down the interstate and it's the white vans that have the no windows or tinted windows. Like that's what we picture.
Yep.
And that's only 8%.
Wow. Really? Only
Yeah, yeah,
8%.
only
Okay.
8%.
So what's the other 92?
Well, so the other 92% is this,
Of
your
course
cell
it
phone.
is. Of course it
Of
is.
course it is. It's enemy number one. As much as we are all addicted to those things and we feel like our life could not be run any way better, without having those, what would we do without them? Traffickers are very smart. So just letting people know on an education here as we dive into these conversations here today, trafficking used to be about kidnapping, but they didn't
Right.
know to call it trafficking back then. Johnny Gosh was trafficked. He was sold into the largest sex trafficking ring in the United States, which was in Omaha.
Wow. I didn't
And
know
yeah, they didn't know to call it that then. They didn't,
that. Right.
yeah, they just didn't. Well, now to present day, because of Amber Alerts and social media, it is too risky for traffickers to kidnap people. Yeah, to take kids or teenagers and just take
Mhm.
them. Now, I'm not saying some of that does happen. I talked about 8% is that. But the rest of it is where the traffickers have learned to get smarter about how do they go after kids or teenagers, and then how do they use manipulation and threats. And that is really the key thing. The biggest MO today of once they lure a kid on, and we can get into that more here, like how do they lure a kid on their phone,
Yeah.
would be then they chip them. And that's probably the biggest MO today. So you can buy a chip online from Amazon even to chip your cat or dog, right? If Sparky
Right.
is, you're afraid Sparky's going to run away, well, you chip Sparky, and pretty soon you can watch Sparky on your phone. And Sparky's only 2 blocks away, so I can go get Sparky. That's what they do to their victims today. They don't have to kidnap them at all because they can watch their every move. They threaten them that if they
I had no
catch
idea.
them running to the police station or running to a medical facility or not being where they're supposed to be at, they'll threaten that they'll kill their family before they get back home.
Wow. I had no idea it was that way.
Yeah, that's the number one. And
So
it is happening a lot. A lot.
yeah, I bet when Sound of Freedom came out, the movie, Tom and I were walking home from it, and you know, eye opening, and it just makes you want to cry and your heart's sick. And I remember we're walking past this couple, and we told them, we just went to Sound of Freedom and chatted a little bit about human trafficking. And they were like, maybe late 60s, early 70s couples, so not old, but because we're 50. So they're not old. And
Yep.
they said, well, it's a good thing we live in rural Iowa because that stuff just doesn't happen here. And I'm like, oh, I think it does. I think it does. And I had no idea that I wouldn't even
Mhm.
thought about chipping
Yeah.
people.
Sound of Freedom, we were so excited about that coming out. Is when I
Yeah,
say we at Team Iowa, because we knew that had been suppressed for 5 years.
right.
For
Yeah,
about 5 years. And if people really want to dive into it, it was Disney that suppressed it for 5 years.
that's
So
right.
that should have
That
people
should
kind
tell
of
us something, right?
that should tell you something, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but luckily, Angel Studios had bought that. And then once that was released, we started renting out theaters so that people could come watch it for free because we knew that was the case. Now, I had shown it in many theaters. And when you know it was the Algona Theater, when I had rented out the theater here, giving away free tickets, there was a group of ladies after the film in the restroom. And I heard them saying, I'm so glad that's not happening here.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't let them leave the restroom until they heard me out. And it's,
Which is
yeah,
good. Yes.
I just thought, oh my goodness. So I knew that we had a lot of work to do because,
Yeah.
and I would agree with them in the sense that film was very well done, cinematic, true story, but
Yep.
it focused more on what's happening outside of this country than what's happening right here in our backyards.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And, I share a lot of stories when I'm out. I've been traveling all over the state. I will go to any community. I think I just did my 67th presentation. I've done to 67 communities. There's over 800 in the state, so I have a lot of work to do to
You have a
get
lot
to
of
all
work
of
to
them.
do yet. Yeah.
I might be 80 when I'm done, but that's the way it is. But some of the, I always tell people there's, living here in Algona. I don't know where your audience is all living at, but I mean, we have some horrible ones that were just right here in Renwick, Iowa. We have a terrible case in Renwick, a terrible case in
Really?
Humboldt County. Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot,
Yeah.
and right here in our backyards.
Is it more of children from immigrants that are coming in? So illegal children, or is it, like our neighbors that we just have no idea?
I don't really have a percentage on exactly that, but I am going to say, based on the stories and the information I've obtained from the detectives and safe house directors, majority is just your everyday neighbor kid. And the Johns are the people who are buying the kids or the victims, because not all of them are kids. They're more than likely your man that is a business owner, wears a suit and tie to work, and probably is married. I mean, they've done stats. So this is your typical John is someone who has a family at home. He's well to do because he can afford the $5,000 ticket that these traffickers get when they buy these people. So yeah, most of the stories I share are just literally, yeah, they're just people. I always like to share the case from Humboldt because it was one of the worst cases in our state, was in Humboldt, Iowa.
Okay.
And that case was brought to in 2012. His name was Michael Malcolm, and I can say his name because it's all over print. You can look it up yourself. But Michael Malcolm was a very successful pioneer seed dealer, and he was leading Bible studies out of his home as a facade, and he had two madams out of Fort Dodge. So these two girls, who were in their early 20s, were bringing him girls or victims up to Humboldt. He would sexually assault them, and then he would take them to the Twin Cities and sell them. Now that man is still in jail today. Well, he's getting due to be released here, but the only reason that he was still in jail this long, and I can get into our laws here why we're number 3 in the country, but it's because he had hundreds of accounts of victims, and that was right in Humboldt. And in 2012, Lori, I'm thinking, how come I didn't know about this? Like we should have heard that, right? If this was a
Yeah.
bad case and
Yeah. I don't remember it at all.
no, because you don't ever see these things on the front page of the newspaper, should be headlines in the radio. But then I always tell the audience, I just want you to sit back and think, if most of the Johns that they have stereotyped are your prominent business people that can afford the ticket, I always say, who pays for media?
Right. Yeah. 100%. I mean, across the board. Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you expound a little bit on when you were just saying the madams would bring up the victims and then they would go and sell them? Like when you say sell them, like are these children disappearing, or are these women disappearing, or are they, what does that look like? Because I think people don't understand, is it my neighbor's daughter that could be trafficked and she lives a normal life and goes to school? Or is it, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes. No, that's a perfect question. So majority of these people, victims, are living right at home. They could, and they're not always troubled homes. I always tell people that it's not always troubled homes. If they're lured online, lured through the games, the gaming apps, or lured through online apps, they could literally be living at home and be threatened and manipulated, brainwashed. Yeah, most of the time, like I said, the modern day is they're not being kidnapped. So when he was selling them in Minneapolis, he's selling them for the night. So he knew the contacts to, make an acquaintance with a John up in the Twin Cities. And then John would, of course, have his way, have his sexual way with these victims. And then, of course, he would bring them back.
Wow. And these women, or I'm assuming there's some boys, men as well. Um, how do they lure them, and how do they get them chipped, and how you do it? Yeah,
Yeah.
this is just boggling my mind, Stacy.
I know, because most people say, like, I even had a doctor who, when I was down speaking in Cherokee here just a few weeks ago, and I had a doctor that came up to me at the end of the presentation. He said he was having a hard time. He said, "Why don't they just take the chip out, or just come to the ER and we'll just take it out for them?" And
yeah,
the thing is, you don't understand that the threats are real to these people. They could have been tortured too. Some of these victims that I've talked to have been tortured. So when you are putting a stigma in them that it's like, hey, you do anything and we will kill you or we will kill your family, you will be surprised at what they're willing to do, right? To just follow
sure.
along. So the phone, the biggest thing that I've learned from, again, all my information comes from detectives, comes from safe house directors, and then a lot from victims themselves. So I've had many, many phone calls and conversations, and a lot of
Right.
them we call survivors because they have overcome. So we definitely call them survivors. But the number one way that they go after girls, more than likely, is on Snapchat. Now, the reason for that is because back in the day when it was more about kidnapping, they would go into a mall and they could easily spot the low self-esteem girls. Like they'd be the ones, right? I mean, it's pretty easy to spot sometimes
Yeah.
low self-esteem. And they would just literally go up to a girl in a mall and say, "You have the most beautiful eyes." Now, if she looked at him with confidence and said, "Why, thank you," they thought bad victim because she was too confident and strong. If the girls replied with, head down, like, oh, thank you, it didn't know how to really respond, they thought good victim. Well, they know the same thing on Snapchat. You more than likely, the girls who are taking all the selfies with the filters, those are easy targets because they know that those are girls wanting attention. Those are girls that have low self-esteem. And girls a lot of times don't realize that when they take that nudity picture or topless picture, it's out there forever.
Sure.
It's in that magic cloud that we all hear about. And traffickers know how to find that. I mean, traffickers are smart. I mean, they have some very smart techie people. They can find a nudity picture, a topless picture of a girl, track it back to her, message her that they found these, and if she does not do what they demand, they will ruin her life by exploiting her.
Sure.
And that's happened. I mean, I have a couple stories that's how it happened. And then that's immediately how they got thrown into trafficking, because now they showed up to be sold because they didn't want these pictures out because they were 16 years old and they really truly believed it would ruin their life. Now, as far as boys, and I always tell the audience, I hate to even say this, but boys are a higher commodity. I mean, we're talking about sexual perversion here. So Johns are wanting young boys, usually under the age of 10, and they're the highest paid. And so boys, those are the gaming apps that they go after. So
Sure.
two of the gaming apps that they have really gone after boys on, one is called Roblox, Roblox, free gaming. I don't think it's a coincidence that that's a free app that these kids can download onto their phones. Now, it's not the game itself that they lure, it's the conversation chat that these 10-year-old boys or younger are having. They think they're playing a game with another 12-year-old boy in Minnesota or another
Right.
adjoining state. And yet the whole time they're answering these questions to probably a 60-year-old man who lives down the street or lives in a neighboring town. And that doesn't send up a red flag for a 10-year-old boy, and they're
Right.
asking questions. So another game that I didn't really know much about, so I learned this from the sheriff of Marion County, which is down by Pella, was GTA, Grand Theft Auto.
Oh,
Well,
yeah. You hear about that all the time.
yeah, that's a big one that they lure kids on, especially boys, because Grand Theft Auto, again, free gaming. The other bad part about GTA is there's zero parental control. So a
Oh,
parent can't even control what they do. I mean, it gets as bad on that game, and these kids know it because I've talked to some kids about it. Their character, their little avatar character, can literally buy a prostitute and have sex with her on that game.
wow.
So not only is the game grooming these kids, but then they'll be playing this game with someone online that they think is another kid their age, and it's really an adult.
Wow.
Yeah.
How do, I mean, it's all just evil and perverse. I understand that. How are these Johns, like, like, how does that all get started and what goes on? Like, you have this prominent business person or whoever it might be, a pastor, or like, how do you know when somebody is doing, like, what are the signals? Because, how do you trust anybody, Stacy?
No, that's a really good question. That gets to the seed of all this. And truly, the number one seed of all of this is pornography.
Sure.
And if you think about it, pornography, when they started coming out with computers, I mean, this goes back to probably when you and I probably started having computers, and all of a sudden you'd have an email or something come to you in a
Yep.
video, like it said, don't click on that link. And then if you did, a porn video would sometimes pop up and you'd be like scrambling to try to get that
Scrambling to
off your
shut that off. Yeah,
screen.
this is definitely different than Playboy magazine under your
Yeah.
brother's mattress.
Yeah, because you have the whole video. And what happened with that was done deliberately on purpose, because with the curious eye, some of these men or whoever their curious eye would just start watching, and it's a very highly addictive thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, if you're addicted to pornography, you're more apt to become a John, because what's going to happen is we have a film that we show now, which I can get back to that later, that we use as a tool. We bought the educational license as Team Iowa, so I use it just as a tool when I'm out speaking to audiences. But there was a pastor that was in that film, and they do a lot of explaining in there. But
hmm
with the pornography, what it is they're watching all this pornography, and their wife isn't wanting anything to do with it, right? So she's not wanting to act out what these men are seeing. So the thing that they do then is they look for someone to buy. And of course, you and I probably back in high school, we probably would have called them prostitutes,
right.
thinking a prostitute makes a choice. And I will tell you that 99.9% of what we think is prostitution, they're being forced. So they're trying to get away from the word prostitution, or
Yeah,
prostitute, because most of them, they're not just roaming. And some of the girls who are roaming the streets, let's say in your bigger metropolitan areas, they're being forced. There might be some that are out there by choice, but very few. But most of them, it's through the dark web, or they just have connections. They know who to call. Okoboji is a frenzy town for human trafficking.
Really?
Well, if you think about it,
Because of the money?
we have
Yeah.
very wealthy people from Omaha, Twin Cities, Sioux Falls coming to Okoboji, and they know exactly who to call to bring some girl or boy, whatever, to these parties, and they have their way with them.
Wow. So how do these, survivors come out of the trafficking?
It's very tough. Some people
'Cause if
are
we
in
don't
for
know what's
years,
happening, we don't know who's doing it. How do they come out? Because they're in this darkness for so long.
long time. Um, Sometimes it is a simple advocate. So, that's one reason why I'm doing this as I'm 100% volunteer on this. Like I do
Right.
this as my own time and my own gas. And the reason I'm doing is if I can save one person, it's worth every amount of time that I'm spending on this. But
Right.
because if it can be an advocate who just they hear simply and then they call them to reach out to them, it could literally be they're just in the right place at the right time to get help. Um, but a lot of times it takes a lot of strength because again they've been very manipulated, they've been extremely threatened, and if they've been shipped it even makes it 10 times harder, right? Because I mean, how are
Right.
they? I mean, we know of a gal that was down in Carroll, Iowa, who had 3 chips in her body.
Wow.
It's very hard. Yeah, I know a gal who she's 55 years old, and when I talked to her, I asked her when she became free, and she just became free at 49. And the first time she got sold was by her parents when she was 4 years old. So she'd been in the sex trafficking world from 4 to 49.
Wow. I mean, the psychological ramifications of that. I-
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
me as a mom, I'm thinking, how could you ever? How could you ever? I mean, we love our kids so much. And then it just goes back to evil. It goes back to, you know, destroying the family, destroying the very image that God created, the preciousness of all of this, not valuing the life. Um, and our society has a hard time with valuing life anyway. So,
That's right. And really, another stat I can give you based on what you just said was 50% is done by someone they know.
wow.
I mean, because they trust them, right?
Right.
And it can go as far as when I say someone you know, but also someone in the community as authority, meaning like teachers,
Yeah.
law enforcement. I mean, there are literally perpetrators who have been in those types of fields. And of course,
Yep.
when you look at them as they're an authority in the community, it's somebody they know, and they're not going to go against them because they think nobody will believe them. But a lot of times when it is parents, it is hard for me to understand this too. I have a dear friend who is a victim survivor.
Survive.
She was a felony survivor, and the first time she got sold was she was 18 months old. Her mom sold her into a porn sex ring, and a lot of times it comes down to not only is it evil and it's money, which we all know that money is the root of all evil, right? So
Right.
when somebody's looking for, well, there's another case in Iowa County here this last year. The mom can't afford rent and groceries, she says, in this day and age of the economy and things like that. And she had 2 teenage daughters that she was selling for sex so that she could pay for that. So, I mean, it's hard for me to understand. I can't even fathom it. Of course, my immediate response is I want to go tie a millstone around their neck is what I want to do. But
Yeah.
it's just hard for me to understand. I don't. I'm just like you. We love our kids. I would never wish them harm, so I can't imagine pushing them in harm's way. I can't imagine doing it.
Yeah. For money, I guess I would rather go scrub toilets all night long than to do something of that nature. I don't understand. My mind just can't wrap around that, Stacy.
I know. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think more than likely, when I listen to some of these victims, there was no Jesus in their lives. There
No.
wasn't. Yeah, no.
I mean, and that's I mean, how else do you explain that? I mean,
Right.
it's just pure evil. When you have pure evil, there is no Christ. They haven't been exposed to Christ, which makes it all the more important that we share that the gospel message. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. So
Yeah.
once somebody becomes a survivor and they're out of the the sex trafficking ring, what happens? What do you do?
Well, a lot of them, the hard part. We only have 4 safe houses in our state, and we
Just
have one in
more?
Ames. We just have 4. Yep. We only have 4. But what I have learned is that most victims want to get as far away from their trafficker as possible. So really going out of state is appealing to them.
Sure,
Now, in saying that, there's other people in other states that we should make it a little bit, we should be a little bit nicer and have more opportunities here. But we have one in Ames, we have 2 in Des Moines, and we have one in Sioux City. As far as the safe houses that statewide, now there might be some other homes and other communities that they're like have a shelter for people or whatever, but they're not known as a statewide
sure.
safe house, place. But and I really love the people that are at all these safe houses. They're wonderful, amazing people. Now, so some people will go there, and what they try to do is get them back on their feet because these girls have been so codependent, right? They're taught, you can't live without me. They control
Right.
them by every little penny. So how are they supposed to like just all of a sudden just get out of that situation? How are they going to pay rent? How are they going to have a living? How do they get a job? Some of them are so timid, and again, the manipulation is they're not really quite ready. So that's what a safe house does. Is
Okay.
sometimes they might live there for up to 3 years until they become socially and independently prepared to go out into the real world.
Right. How do you keep the perpetrator from finding them, from tracking them down? I mean, do they ever feel safe?
Some of them would tell you no. And even though that they might, let's say they've removed chips or things like that, and not everybody has chips. I mean, tattooing is another way that they mark their victims as well, just so that they know that they're owned. That's what they try to do is, but let them know that you're no longer your own person. We own you. But as far as safe, yeah, there was a safe house in Cedar Rapids, and the girls are not, victims are not to let, obviously, right? Their trafficker know where they're at or anything like that.
Mhm.
Well, she had, for whatever reason, through manipulation, let the trafficker know where she was at. So then that safe house became completely compromised, and they
Right.
had to shut it down.
Yeah.
So it is a real threat that if anybody would happen to find out, and I'll be honest, most people don't even know the addresses to these places. I mean, you have to. It's a very Yep, it's a confidential thing, and I think that's
Right.
important because the safety is important not only for the workers but for any of the girls
Right.
that are living there.
Yeah. Because there could be dire consequences, I would assume, for anyone
Absolutely.
involved. Anyone involved. Yeah.
Yes.
So how do we stop these rings? Like, what's being done to stop them?
You know, the biggest thing, remind me to get back to like why I think we're number 3 in the
Okay.
country. But how do we stop them? Well, number one is just awareness. I mean, most people have no clue how bad it is in Iowa. And it's not just sex trafficking. You could have a whole nother component we could talk about as labor trafficking because we
I
have
was
a
going to
lot
ask
of,
you about that as well. Yeah.
yeah, labor trafficking. And of course, that's dealing more with the, illegal aliens that have been coming they've been coming all over our country. And of
Right.
course, we have a lot that have come. Most of the people that have come into our state of Iowa, Wright County, which is Eagle Grove and Clarion area, we have a lot over there as well.
Right.
Now, saying that, as far as how awareness, we need to let people know, we're not really Iowa nice. We don't want to be Iowa nice anymore. And I think because we've
No,
been
I'm tired of
Iowa
being
nice,
Iowa nice.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think because we've been Iowa nice, we put blinders on, like, well, that doesn't happen here. I mean, we've heard that many times. And we turn the cheek. We turn like we might see something, and the Holy Spirit gives you discernment for a reason.
Yes. Yes,
And
he
if
does.
we see something, I would say if you see something, say something. Like we got to make phone calls. And all of the detectives, all the law enforcement have always said that come to my presentations, we would rather get a phone call and it lead to nothing than to not get a phone call at all.
Right.
So how do we start breaking these down is if more people are aware of that's even happening and then what to look for, now when they're out and about and then the discernment button goes off, now they make the phone call. So it's just a sequence of events like that we have to get people taking action instead of turning their eyes. But we had when I first met some of the detectives back, like I said, that was been almost 2 years ago. They were down in the North Liberty area, and they were just working on it was a 4-year bust. It was taking them 4 years to bring down this huge trafficking ring, which was in Iowa City.
Wow.
I remember asking, it was a unique case because all the victims were students at the University of Iowa. That's why it
Okay.
was unique. Going to class every day. Yet they were
Sure.
being trafficked. And fast forward to last summer, I asked the detectives how that case turned out. And, they had to make some deals, unfortunately, with some of the low lying traffickers because they wanted to go after the king trafficker. And he did get 30 years. Now, that was it wasn't because of our new laws, which I want to get back to, but it was because he had so many accounts, right?
Mhm.
Well, I had asked the detectives after that case was over, the big guy got 30 years. I said, do you feel like you got a handle on the sex trafficking rings in Iowa City? And he shook his head and he said, Stacy, we will never, ever get ahead of the trafficking rings in Iowa City.
Wow. Why?
There's just so much and it's so vast. And when I say that, it's not, I just want to make sure I'm always clear. That case was Iowa City, but this is happening at every college campus in the state. This is not just Iowa City. This is in Ames. This is happening in, Cedar Falls. One of the victims in the film that we show, it was Morningside College and, Sioux
Wow.
City. So it's happening everywhere. And our college students they're just not aware. And again, they're not being kidnapped. They always think that, but that's not what it is. They could literally, they become your friend. They become your buddy at college. This is why it's so prevalent at colleges. You think you're just meeting a guy at college and you become buddies, and pretty soon he manipulates you to where he says he's gonna sell you to some of his buddies, and it literally starts off with that. And these girls are feeling threatened, or they don't want to disappoint that boyfriend that they fell madly in love with, and
Right.
so they get sold to the boyfriend's friends, and then it goes a lot further and deeper than that.
Wow. So let's get back to why we're number 3 in Iowa.
Okay. Well, when I usually ask people, why do you think we're number 3? The automatic answer I always get is, well, we have the I corridor, we have I-80,
Well, that's what
35.
we've heard, right? That's what we've heard
Yep,
because we've got
that's
the
what it is.
corridor. Yeah.
That's right. We have the corridor. And I always tell people that is true when we're talking about literally transporting or like kidnapping and things like that. So I
Right.
don't want to disregard that. Yes, we do have a large interstate. And yes, there is some trafficking and transporting of people along those things. But if
Yeah.
we already discussed that 8% is kidnapping and the rest is through manipulation, and they can literally be living at home or in college, it was our laws. So for years, I love to bring this up because people don't realize that for years, Iowa has been so lenient that we became a breeding ground for human trafficking. So
Really?
for years, yeah, we were for years. I mean, years. I couldn't tell you how many years it is. We were a class D felony. Well, a D felony, you can literally steal $1,000 TV from Walmart, and that's a D felony. So you might get a couple years in jail. You might
Mhm.
get a $1,500 fine, and that's it. And most of them don't do jail time. So imagine, okay, so some of these victims have shared, they make about $60,000 in a weekend for their trafficker. Remember, the wealthy guys
Wow.
can afford the ticket, right?
Right.
So if you're making 60,000 a weekend off of one girl, do you think a $1,500 fine is going to do anything to you?
Nothing.
No, nothing. Go ahead, I'll pay the $1,500 fine. It's a slap on the wrist.
Mhm.
So that's where we've been. And then where did we have to come around? And I always love to bring up my dear friend, Mark Thompson. So Mark Thompson is a legislator. He is from Clarion, Wright County.
Mhm.
And he was a military. He was a Marine. And anyway, he ended up worked his way up into the military ranks, and he eventually became the Benghazi whistleblower. And of course, when you're a whistleblower, you're released from the military. So he just wanted to move back to the Clarion Eagle Grove area because he graduated from Eagle Grove High School.
Right.
And God placed a calling on him to run for office to help combat human trafficking. And I always share this because as a freshman legislator, most freshmen kind of sit back and observe, and they really
Yeah.
kind of wonder why they took this role in the first place because they're just trying to take this all in. But Mark took action. He initiated a bill, and that bill would encompass that anyone who benefits from trafficking. So this is the madams, this is the Johns, this
Oh.
is the
Mhm.
trafficker themselves, anyone who benefits. And it was important that those words were put in that bill, and that it would be that if they were caught with someone over the age of 18, it would be a class B felony, same as attempted murder, manslaughter, etc. If they got caught with someone under the age of 18, it would be a class A felony, same as murder, life in prison. Well, that went through our state, our House and our Congress and our Senate, and passed 100% unanimously. And then
Wow.
on May 16th, yeah, May 16th of 2023, our governor signed that into action. So that is our new law, which is great, right? So it's like,
Yes.
hey, we're not going to be Iowa nice anymore. No, in fact, you deserve life in prison.
Right.
Now, saying that, Lori, we have not had a case yet prosecuted under that new law.
Why?
I know, we all ask that. Why? I mean, I'm constantly asking law enforcement and I'm asking the detectives, why have we not? Because we know that if
Yeah.
it'll
One
set
case.
precedents. Yes,
Yeah.
it'll set all our precedents. I mean, so there is some cases out there that they're working on this. Listening to county attorneys all over the state as well, because I always invite them to our presentations, is there's a lot of boxes to check to go after for human trafficking. I get that because you have to solely engage that victim or multiple victims who are going to cooperate with you, right?
Right.
And so that's a problem, is how do we get these victims so that we can, get them through there. Plus, we've learned that every county is only allowed so many cases a year. So if you have all these cases, you know what the most I've heard so far from any county was 12,
Only
and
allowed so many cases a year?
the
I don't
least
even know
I've
what to say to
heard,
that one. Go ahead.
this is all the stuff I've learned being out on the road, and I would tell you continually, my jaw drops because just when I think I've heard it all, I hear something else, and it's just I feel like we take a step forward and then we take 3 steps back, and we're just going to keep trudging along. But it's like if the least amount of cases I've heard is 6 in one county, and the most I've heard is 12. I think Algona's 10, or Kasuth County's 10.
Yeah.
So imagine if, like, there's a gal down in he had a gal that had a list that she had kept of men that she'd been sold to, over 300 names. How long do you think 300 court cases are going to take? A long time.
Long time.
So a lot of times the ball gets dropped. So I think it's partly that. I think it's also a lot of these county attorneys are quick to pass the buck over to the feds and let the feds take over instead of letting our new law in Iowa that Mark Thompson initiated. Like, let's use our new law because we're
Right.
saying we're not going to be Iowa nice anymore. But when they're passing the buck off to the feds, now that just means we have nothing to
It's
do with
into
it
the
here in Iowa.
abyss. Yeah.
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 And so I've had a couple detectives tell me, based on their own experiences, that there's too many county attorneys that are friends with Johns and they don't want to prosecute.
Wow.
And because again, I'm just going to go back to the stereotype. If it's the guy who wears a suit and tie to work, who makes a lot of money to pay for the ticket, who has probably a family at home, they might be in the same circles. Now, of course, I've told Todd, we have a wonderful county attorney, by the way, and I've told Todd, you better not be friends with Johns. And of course, that's easy to say. But a lot of times we've all said, there's a lot of us that don't even know. There's every audience they've told me that I have in front of me, there's going to probably be at least one John in the audience
Really?
because that's how prevalent it is. So you could be out at a restaurant. There's probably a John sitting somewhere in that restaurant who has been addicted to porn, more than likely, and has bought another human being for his sexual perversion.
Wow. That's staggering to me.
And I will guarantee it's in Algona.
I 100% believe you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a couple friends that are guidance counselors in schools. One was in Pocahontas, another one is over in Eastern Iowa. And we have these kids that come in, and both of the kids happen to be kids of illegal, people that came in, and probably weren't with their parents, when they came. I'll use that in quotations because in both cases, the girls came to the guidance counselor and said, I'm going to be moving to California, or I'm going to be moving to New Hampshire to go live with my aunt and uncle now. And, both of them are like, we know that's not true, but we have no way to prove it. We have no way to prove that she is being sold to a whole different state. And just that, both of them are like, I just stay up at night thinking about these kids. Like, how do we start protecting them better? And I know, changing the laws is amazing. And as a community, what do we need to do different? Let's just use our community as example. Algona, what do we need to do different to
Well,
stop what's happening right here?
first and foremost, we need to have more conversations with kids to where the kids are understanding how dangerous the phone is because they're not going to want to give up that phone.
No.
But but you know what we have? We really truly have so many absent parents. We have most families are double working families
Yep.
and they're just exhausted and tired. So when the kid comes home, they're just like, just go play. They just basically kids no longer go outside to play. They go in their room and get on their phone and they're playing all these
Mm,
games and they're getting lured in
yeah.
without the parents even knowing because the parents don't want to pay attention to what they're playing. And I always tell parents, your number one job is to protect the kids,
Yep.
not be their friend. So
Nope.
when your child gets upset with you, your teenager gets upset because you won't let them have GTA or something like that on their phone, that's your job. Like they're
Hmm.
going to be upset with you, but I see too many parents, they don't want the hassle, they don't want the stress, so they just let them have it. So parents are clueless, kids are
Yeah.
clueless, and then if we really get down to it, we're grooming our kids. And it happens in our schools, it happens in society, it's happening with our library books. And I know people, they just cringe when we start talking about the books. We are trying to normalize sex for kids. And
We
when you
are.
start to
Yeah.
normalize sex for kids, they become easier targets because it doesn't seem like that big of a deal anymore.
Hmm. Yeah. 100%. 100%. So, like you were talking about Disney to start with, just the shows on TV, the books in the library, the games, the everything. It seems overwhelming. Like, is there really anything that we can do? You could take an
Yeah.
attitude like, well, it's going to happen, but we don't want
Yeah.
to do that. We don't want to do that, right?
I
Because
know. Like, I know it's an easy attitude. And I think you're right. People take that and they will have that attitude until it happens to one of their family members. And then
exactly.
all of a sudden, it's not so fun anymore. And, I'm willing to put myself out there in the sense of, I get people who criticize me for, bringing up pornography or the grooming. But if they had listened to all the victims that I have talked to, and you find out it's all connected and how the grooming starts and
Yeah.
how easily, even down to third grade or less, they're so easily manipulated and they want to
Yeah.
please everybody. They don't want to disappoint people. And you start grooming them, it is, yeah, to me, this is where it all starts. I have a parents, two husband and wife, who are the parents of a boy from Cherokee who's coming to our next Patriot meeting next month. Their son was groomed and assaulted by a male teacher in Cherokee,
Well,
and they're going to share their story. Um, it's like I said, it's happening in so many places. And so, yeah, when you talk about like, what can we do? I mean, I keep having hope that we're bringing awareness, that we're bringing
right.
encouragement. We're trying to stop all of these things. And I just think as Christians, we got to get on the offense instead of the defense all the time.
100%. Because we're very good about coming around after something happens, whether it's a disaster or, a tragedy. We're all about coming around in and loving on people. But you're right. I mean, we have to stop being Christian nice too, not just Iowa
Yeah.
nice. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
yes.
okay
So
to
many
be
Christians.
mad. It's okay to be in people's face. It's okay to be in other people's business if you're saving somebody.
Well, you had a good point right there. Okay, so when a disaster happens, natural disaster, it's nothing for Christians to get on a bus or trucks and start heading out to North Carolina, right?
Yeah,
But in our own state, right here, we have a crisis and a disaster. We are number 3 in the country for human trafficking, and I don't see people doing anything about it.
right.
Where are the Christians standing up then? Why are they not going down to the seed of the pornography and the grooming? Let's start there, and
Yeah,
then maybe we can save some people that way. So it's yeah. I mean, when you like again, when you listen to the victims, that's all it takes for me. Is that gives me the fuel to keep fighting because all it takes is when you listen to their stories, and I
yeah,
can't even fathom what they've gone through. And all they want to do is they want to unlock someone else's prison, whether they've been in a situation or prior before it even starts. So
right.
I have two survivors who I'm working with now to get them on a speaking realm so that they can go out and start speaking to churches so that they can hear, everywhere can hear their stories.
Yeah, yeah. I keep going back to the couple that we talked to on the way home from The Sound of Freedom. Like, people just don't think it happens in their town. They just don't think it happens in their town. It's sort of like, when you and I grew up, there was that big murder of the Driesmans, right?
Yeah.
Like that just doesn't happen in our town, you know?
Right.
Yet it does. And that's a lot more, human trafficking is a lot more prolific than somebody murdering somebody else's family. So,
Yeah,
and
because you're taking away their total innocence in childhood. And
yeah,
like I said, and it's boys. I mean, people, they automatically always think it's girls too. But when I tell you that they are more after boys, that is so true. So
wow.
it's just, yeah, we need to get people educated. And then
Mm-hmm.
once they're educated, they got to do something about it. When they see something, they say something. We're really trying hard. I always ask the detectives, if you could ask for anything from our state, what would it be? And they would love to see our state house or Brianna Byrd, our attorney general, to hand over and say, you can have a big task force. And this task force would include multiple people to where you have full-time detectives all the time that only focus on human trafficking. You have judges who only work on sex crimes and human trafficking. That you have, more opportunities for the mental health capacity that we need for
Right.
that. That only focus on that group. So if we could ask for anything, we're always asking people to call any legislator you want, because if we have not had a case prosecuted yet in the state, then we need to say we, the
We need
people, are
something
not
different.
okay with that. Yeah, we
Right.
need something different. So let's get a task force going so that we can have that. So that's one thing. Another action step that I give people is to contact
Call your
anyone, call.
legislature. Yeah.
Yeah, call
Yeah.
them.
And I'll put the link, everybody, in the show notes so that if you're in Iowa, you know where to call. You find your legislator, and you can do that for every state that you're listening in, because I have people listening all over the place. What's the number one state? What's number one and two?
I don't have that exactly sitting in front of me, but if you're going by per capita, again, because that's what I would say, Iowa's per capita,
Per
then
capita, yeah.
it'd be easy, of course, to think of California and New York City for
Right.
sure, right? I mean, Hollywood, we got a lot going on down there, right? Especially
Yeah.
with all, which I love, truly do love that the whole Diddy thing is exploding, because once people realize that the people they've idled have been human trafficking, it's not gonna sit well with them, I hope, sit well
I
in their
hope
heart.
not. I hope
I hope
not.
not.
And we'll see if all those names come out, and we'll see, who gets
Yep,
anyway.
I hope so. I pray for that every day, that the reveal will happen between Epstein and Diddy. And I think, be prepared. I do believe that we're going to hear somebody in the sports arena with the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yep.
Probably in country music, same thing. So I appreciate the fact that God is working to get these people exposed, because it's everything we've been talking about. But yeah, so it's not a wonder that it's not through, like I said, New York and California and things like that. But it's also, when we say rural Iowa, in the middle of the country, yes, we do have our interstates, and yes, we're pretty protected because we're in the middle of the country, but we were so lax on our laws. It was like people said, just go to Iowa.
Right. Because you're gonna get a slap on the wrist, and that's it. Because what's $1,500?
That's right.
Nothing for $60,000 a weekend.
Yeah. And that girl that I'm talking about, the victim, that she shared that she was making about 60,000 a weekend. She was also being sold to almost 50 men a night. So, and they were the multi-million dollar homes she described.
Wow.
It's hard to even fathom.
I can't even fathom it, Stacy. I just can't fathom it. Just the amount of evil is satanic. It's just like satanic. It's satanic worship is what it is. It's
Oh yeah,
satanic worship, because all of the pornography, all of anything that is sexually perverse is satanic. So,
yeah. Because the devil knows if he can destroy what is meant for good, right? The
yeah,
the the marriage, the families, all of that. Yeah, then he wins.
yeah, he wins. Yeah. And the only answer for that is Jesus. So,
Well,
that's
guess
how
what?
you can
We
overcome
know
evil,
who
right?
wins in the end, right?
What's that?
Yeah, we know who wins in the end. So I
We
always,
know who wins
and
in
that's
the
our
end, but
hope.
we want more victory right now, because we don't want people suffering like this.
No. But I did have my list here of where I'm going next, if you didn't mind if I say where I'm going next.
Absolutely. Where are you going next?
So next will be, I just kind of have I always put my schedule out on my Facebook page to show where I'm going. 90% of where I go is churches, because for one, churches do have a great sound system. They usually have TVs and, good
Right.
sound system and projectors. But also, it's great to have the Christian backing on all of this as well, because we know that we are in a spiritual war, right now. But I will be this Sunday night. I'll be in George, Iowa. So if anybody's listening and you're anywhere in that Northwest Iowa part of it, I'll be at George Tabernacle Church at 7 p.m. Most of these are all at 7 p.m. Then I'll be in Hampton on October 28th at Faith Baptist Church. And then I'll be up in the northeast corner of the state, November 10th in Elkader, Iowa. So if anybody's up in the northeast part, I encourage you, it's worth the hour drive or more if you're in that Decorah area, at St. Joseph Catholic Church there in Elkader on November 10th. And then I'll just give you the one last one here in November. Well, it's not the last one, but November 18th, I'll be in Manning, Iowa. Anybody can reach out to me too if they want to find out where these are, or they can look on Facebook. But because I got Lake City, Sioux City, I got more coming up, and Storm Lake, I got another one coming back again in Storm Lake. So I am just going to keep, like I said, I got my boots on. I'm in this army, and I'm willing just to keep marching on. So
yeah, for those people listening from other states, how do they find someone like you, or a team Minnesota or a team Nevada? Like, how do they find those things so that they can help? They can, be educated. They can do what they want to do.
I would say, first you can probably look up some organizations, but I always say, there's some organizations, there's good and bad of everything. I'm just going to tell you that right now. There's good and bad of everything. There's some people who are not, they're for profit instead of nonprofit, and they're out doing this, which just blows my mind too. But because, we're just a group of volunteers knowing that, God has called us on this assignment. But I would say to first start off, Team America is who we're affiliated with. So if you looked up Team America with Jeffrey Prather, you can find some state contacts in whatever state you're in. So that'd be one way of doing it. Second thing would be is, again, just Google or search, human trafficking coalitions or task force or networking groups in your state. And maybe they have someone that is a good speaker to come out. But I would encourage anyone, because the film that I talked about earlier that we bought the educational license to is called Grid Shot. G-R-I-D.
Okay.
Yeah, Gridshok. With it not sitting in front of me there. Grid Shock, you can rent online yourself. Now, we bought the educational license, so we travel with it. We show it wherever we're going. It's only 55 minutes. It's a documentary, but it was done right here in Iowa by Vanessa McNeil. So she went to Iowa State University and then got her master's at UNI. And so she put this all together, which she did such an excellent job of saying, what is sex trafficking? Who's involved? What is the Johns? And you'll hear some of the stats that I shared with you today that'll come through on there. So it's really important, I think, to watch that. You can rent it. If you just type in Grid Shock documentary on Google, it'll come up. It says you can rent it for $10. It's worth the $10 to watch.
Worth the $10. Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're in another state, please watch it, because even though it might say Iowa, well, you're going to learn a lot just from what is happening in Iowa, and then learn from us. Learn from us, maybe talk to your legislators, find out what your laws are, because if you're relaxed like Iowa was, you're heading down the wrong slope.
Yeah. So action items, first thing that somebody should do is call their legislature in Iowa, if you're listening from Iowa, and say, why the heck hasn't anything been prosecuted? This is not okay.
Right.
We definitely need a task force. So if you have a judge that's completely devoted to this, he can hear all 300 of those cases.
Yes.
Yes. Which is, oh my gosh.
Yes. And mental health, all that will encompass that task force.
All of it encompassing all of that. But yeah, just making it a lot more difficult for this to take place.
So that's your first action step. Second is get to a presentation, become more educated, because then that way when you see something, you say something. And I would probably say that is the most important action step I can give people, is just do something with what you see for your discernment, and be aware of what it is you're looking for. Right. Again, the police would rather have a phone call and it be nothing than you could have saved somebody's life. So make sure that they're doing glaring? That.
Is there anything glaring you'd be like, if this happens, always call? Is there anything in particular that
I would say look for the signs. Of course, you're not going to be able to see a chip in somebody unless you work in a radiology department of a hospital. But if you see tattoo markings, the number one tattoo is on the back of the neck, which in Sound of Freedom, she had one on the back of her neck. but the most prevalent one is a barcode. A barcode on the back of the neck is the most prevalent. And if it's done well enough, a trafficker can scan his victims to keep track of them. So, yeah. In fact, there's a place in Sioux Falls. I think it's right outside of Sioux Falls. She will remove tattoos for free for victims because tattoos are really prevalent. We'll also see tattoos on the inside of the bottom lip. So if you work in a
It's like a
dental office,
racehorse.
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And then of course on the chest area is another prominent spot with usually it's a crown with a man's name or a man's initials. Again, it's about ownership. If they threaten these girls that, I own you, you can run, but you can never hide. That's how the whole manipulation starts. So, I mean, looking for signs like that, but also looking for like, if a guy's going in a gas station with 3 other girls and he stands outside the girls' restroom and then they don't speak and they just follow along, that's a red flag. I mean, your discernment
Right.
button should
That's
be
that's
like,
that's obvious. Yeah.
yeah, what's going on there? The games, parents, you got to pay attention to the games that your kids are on. I personally, if I had to go back, my kids would never be on Roblox, GTA, Snapchat. It's those kind of conversations of being the protective parent instead of being their friend.
Right.
And I don't care what kind of a fit they're going to give you, but I want to protect my kids. That's if we know from all the detectives, that's the number one way they go after kids. Why would you not stop that?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's so important.
Well, I think a lot of parents are like, well, my kid is discerning. They won't be sucked in, they know not to
Mhm.
do those things.
Yeah,
And
I would love to
think of
say
all
I
the stupid
also,
stuff that I did.
yeah,
I'm like, yeah, you would have thought that I would have had a better brain than that, but I didn't.
no, I know. And if again, I would love to tell those parents, I would love to give them the phone number of all these victims and say how easy it was.
Yeah,
They were in like that and they didn't even know how they got in it.
right.
Because yeah, they're not discerning. They don't see red flags like we do as adults.
No, no. And so many adults don't see the red flags either, Stacy.
No,
Yeah.
they don't.
No, we're kind of blinded by it's just not going to happen to us. Not going to happen to our family. Yeah.
And pray. I would say the last action
Well,
step
yeah,
is
you have to pray. Yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah.
all darkness be brought into the light. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Amen. Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate, I
Thanks for having me
appreciate
on
you.
today.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate all that you're doing. This is great. So many things I didn't know. Like my jaw is like still on the ground. So
Yeah, and there's a lot of books out there and information. So if anybody has any questions, they can reach out. So Lori, I'll send you my email and cell phone so that they can, if anybody
okay.
needs to reach out to me, they sure can.
All right. There's a couple other things that Stacy and I decided we wanted to add to this interview. And so we're going to talk about some executive orders that have gone down and some that haven't. So if you have any political issues, you might not want to listen to this part, but we're going to talk about it anyway.
Yeah, I just wanted to really quickly, I didn't bring it up because so many people, when they hear politics or political, they just immediately, cover their ears. They're like, I don't want to get involved. But I always tell everybody every political issue started from a biblical one. So
Exactly.
the biblical issue here is human trafficking. And it's been going on for years and years and years. But the first and only president who has ever signed executive orders, and I was trying to find the number because I was going to bring them up, but I cannot find them, of course, when I wanted to look at it quickly. But you can look up yourself. Just start Googling what executive orders did Donald Trump put into play.
Mm-hmm.
And he did this in 2016. So his very first year, some of his very first executive orders were all on human trafficking. Now,
Wow.
I will tell you, no other president has done that. But I
No
am
other
talking,
president
no,
ever?
no, nope. And the Kamala Harris campaign, or let's just go to the Biden administration. Let's say the Biden administration. Not once did they even talk about human trafficking, nor instill any other executive orders on it. So, when they're out and about, I've never heard Kamala say, we're going to fight human trafficking. We've never heard that. And
In
when,
fact, she actually dodges the questions on that. And
right.
so has Biden. Yeah.
And when our border is a lot of times in my presentation, I talk about how our border is a problem because we do have, when you asked me that question before, I don't have a percentage, but it's very obvious that if you look at the last stat, there's 350,000 kids missing in the United States that came across our border, not with adults, not with parents, and they're missing. Now, anybody
Where
with
did they
common
go?
now,
I mean,
where did
one
they
can
go?
only deduct like what happened to those kids.
That's right. And
Yeah.
more than likely, sex and labor trafficked. And then it gets deeper. It goes into more than likely probably harvested for their organs. And that's a whole nother
Another
conversation. But
topic. Yeah.
it is. So I just want people to realize if you don't want to get involved in politics, but you're a Christian believer, just turn the word to biblical. Just say, I want to get involved in the biblical issues because this is all biblical. And then the politics are just something that people just don't even like that word, but we need to start fighting. We need to stand up. And I will tell you, just based on what I fight alone for human trafficking, whether I love Trump or anything else or not, I would vote for Trump just based on this issue alone.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. And for the fact that the other party has not done anything about it, and in fact, opened the borders wide to have 350,000 children are missing
Yes.
in the last 3.5 years.
Yes. So
Yeah.
we have a problem.
We have a
Major
problem and it needs to be addressed. And we need to stand
Yes.
up and we need to get our heads out of the sand and vote for policy, don't vote for person. What are the policies? What is going to save our kids? What's going to protect our kids? What's going to protect our families? Those are the things that we need to be talking about and voting for.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep. Let's get on the offense, people.
that's right. Awesome. Thanks, Stacey.
Thanks, dear.